Well, I'm Rev Bonnie, the community spiritual leader here. And first of all, I want to say happy Super Bowl Sunday. And thank you all for choosing to be here instead of at home fixing all those snacks and things that I think people are looking forward to later. I want to start off by reading something for you to contemplate, and we'll be talking about this throughout this morning. Religious and social exclusionism were not God ordained. We set up these behaviors when we refuse to see one another as mutually driven beings going other ways than ours. Did you catch that? Now, not tomorrow, not next year. Now is the divine moment that allows us to heal whatever needs healing and get on with life together. Well, when I told somebody that the topic for this month, the theme that we'll be looking at all month, was seeking the common good, oneness, the response was, oneness? You've talked about that a lot already. Yeah, well, one of the things that I think maybe you all have noticed if you've been coming for a while is there's just a few of those principles that we teach, that we live by, that we practice, and we come at those and speak about those same ones from a whole lot of different perspectives every Sunday. So you're getting the same thing, yes, but with a different take on it. And this month, oneness again, as we're looking at oneness, we're looking through that different lens, seeking a common good. Now, normally when I've talked about oneness in the past, I usually quote some of Ernest Holmes' famous ones. Unity is expressed in multiplicity, unity without uniformity, and in several places he talks about the individualized expression of the one, that we are each individualized expressions of that one. And so each one of those quotes is really focused on assuring us that we get to be who we are, which might be different than who someone else is, and yet we can still be from, made of, and part of that whole or that one. And so now, as we've assured our individuality and that individual expression, I think we're taking it a step further, bringing it around full circle as we seek the common good. The definition of common good is the benefit or interest of all. So how do we find that common good, and how do we know when we've found it? Another concept or vision that we hold that you've heard a lot about from up here and other places in the centers around the country, and that is a world that works for everyone. That's our vision. That's a vision that we hold, a world that works for everyone. And I believe that that world that works for everyone is a world that is seeking that common good. And as I thought about it, I realized this is a value that I think I've had probably, if not most of my life, all of my life, but I never really saw it put into action quite the way I did when I had an experience where I got to travel with a man named Alan Savory, and he wrote a book called Holistic Management. Now, the premise that Alan was working on is he's from Africa, and he was seeing how the destruction of the land was happening because of the ranching that was taking place on the land and the large animals, and how they were being sort of penned into certain areas, and then that land would just be destroyed. And so he came up with a system of ranching that modeled itself after the natural way that herds of hooved animals move through prairies and plains. And when he set up that system, it helped to revitalize and bring back the land, bring back different species that had disappeared. And he brought that system over here and into Mexico as well. Along with that system of ranching, he created a system that's part of that process of how to make decisions and decision making. And for me, that was the part that was most interesting, because what he did is he brought in every stakeholder into the decision making process. And what that meant was anyone who was going to be impacted by the decision got to participate in that process. Now, traditionally, the ranchers, I talked to some of them, the rancher would hire staff and tell them what to do. Well, with this new system, not only were the staff included in the decision-making process, but so were his children and his spouse. And sort of an unexpected and unintended consequence was many of the ranchers talked about how their marriages were saved. Go figure. That they had increased positive relationships with their kids, involvement from their kids, and so they had experienced something, not just the revitalization of their land, but of their relationships. The other thing that they did in the decision-making process was think not just about the immediate gratification, immediate how much can we make or whatever, but they thought out at least 7 years, if not more, and how that would impact those future generations. And the other thing they did was take the time to really drill down to what is it that everyone who was part of that decision-making process really wanted. Because we bring to the table often, well, I want this, I want something. But when you really start thinking about it, there's something usually way under there that's the real basis of what we want. When I teach a class, I don't remember which one here, but one of the classes I do an exercise, and so some of you might have already done this in pairs, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to do it with me as your partner this morning. So in your bulletin should be a notes page that you can pull out. There's pens. If you don't have one, there's pens in the back of the seats. Get a pen, and I'm just going to give you a chance to see what this looks like. If you have a piece of note paper, do you need one? You got it? Okay. So at the top of that sheet, just jot down something that you want. It could be maybe your New Year's resolution that you're intending to achieve. It could be something you want to accomplish. It could be something tangible. It could be relational in terms of relationship. Now, I know we all want world peace. That's kind of a big general thing, but think about something that you personally want in your life right now and jot that down at the top. And then just take a moment to contemplate that. And I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I want you to jot down whatever comes into your mind immediately. Don't censor it, don't judge it, just jot down the next thing that comes to your mind. So thinking about what it is that you want, what do you really want? And jot that down. And again, what do you really want? What else comes to mind? Jot that down. And now, what do you really want? What else comes to mind? And one more time, what do you really want? Now in the class, you do that in pairs, and we do that for 5 minutes. We just keep asking, what do you want, what do you want? So you could continue this at home and see how much further you get. But I encourage you to think about that, and I imagine some of you already shifted from whatever the initial want was to what showed up even after asking it about 4 or 5 times. So it's interesting to see how that process works, so feel free to share that with each other over lunch and see where you started and what you ended up with. But what I found when I saw this process used is that if groups of people or individuals could come together and ask each other that question, what do you really want? And listen to the answer and then say yes, and what do you really want? And keep asking it till you get to that real bottom line, what we really want. Usually there is where you find that common good. From that bottom line, what you really want is often where you can create that win-win solution to whatever the situation or issue might be. And as we seek that common good, often we can move out of an impasse into a forward movement of some sort. So here's another thought for us to consider. This is out of the Unity magazine of January this year, and it's an article about Matthew Fox, who is a theologian and mystic. And the author says, "What we need is a true religion, one that begins with admitting facts, whether political, social, ecological, or otherwise. As Fox says, if we can't deny denial, then God is absent. God is about truth. It's not about denial." Significantly, Fox is not referring to truth as religious dogma. Rather, he's referring to truth as a lived experience that begins with admitting facts and then moving into inspired action. Action that is informed by a deep awareness of our true divine nature and is thus marked by reverence and awe. More specifically, Fox believes that humans need to return to an experience of our inherent belonging, not merely to our families or communities, but to the larger world and to the cosmos itself. Now, what struck me about that is that idea of inherent belonging. That was a new concept for me. That was something I thought, wow, that feeling of belongingness was a new way for me of looking at oneness and of expressing oneness. And I think the reason that it struck me so much is because as a kid, I was someone who felt like I didn't belong. And I know that as I have taught classes here, as I've done practitioner work with people over the years, I often hear I grew up feeling like I didn't belong. I grew up feeling like I didn't fit in. As a kid, I was the one with cooties that everybody ran away from. I cried a lot, so I got teased a lot. And I grew up in a community where most people were very wealthy and our family wasn't. I wasn't part of that elite social class that had special parties for certain things that I wasn't even really clear about what they were doing sometimes. So, of course, I left that community 7 hours after I graduated, flew all the way across the country. And in 1976 in college, I came out. And all that did was serve to increase my feeling of not belonging or not fitting in. In fact, what it did was add a piece where I felt like I needed to hide a part of who I was and tuck that away so that other people wouldn't know about it. And then I became very aware of the fact that I could tuck that away. I could hide it when other people's differences, the parts of them that society says don't belong, they couldn't hide. And so in a way, I was privileged just because I could hide and cover that piece that I felt needed to be hidden and didn't belong. Now, at first, I will admit, in college, I wasn't that good at hiding. And so I had a role at that time. I was part of the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and I was a leader in that group. And as soon as I came out, I was asked to step down. I was no longer allowed to lead or really belong to that group. What that did was encourage me to start studying biblical passages on a much deeper level. I started looking for early translations as opposed to paraphrases, and I started trying to figure out how it is I could still belong. I was also told, because I wanted to be a minister way back then, that women are not ministers. So on two levels, I was working real hard to figure out how I could belong. What that did was set me on a path for healing. Of course, there was therapy, hours of therapy. I joined various 12-step programs, even ones that I wasn't really a part of. I just went to learn and understand and develop who I was. And I eventually found my way into the First Church of Religious Science up in Albuquerque. When I walked in, I loved the message. And I thought, wow, this is really something I could get behind. I could probably even be a minister in this philosophy. So I walked up to someone who I knew and I said, what does this place think about people like me? And she kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I realized at that moment that I didn't need to defend who I was anymore. I didn't need to hide who I was anymore, that it was a non-issue in this tradition. And so I got to get on with my spiritual life and my spiritual healing, my spiritual goals, and I got to get on with life together, as they talked about in that initial reading. So within this teaching that's rooted in oneness, I found a new experience, and that experience was belonging. So what does it mean to belong? What does it mean to you to feel like you belong? What does it feel like if you belong? And what does that look like? For me, it meant having a place at the table, so to speak, being welcome. It meant that I saw people like me represented within that community or within the government or positions in society at all levels. And not only did I see people like me, but I saw all individualized expressions of the one in those positions and sitting around the table. I realized that there was plenty of room at the table for all the ways that God expressed. So, due to my personal experiences, I have a high value in inclusivity and building community where all feel welcome or that all feel like they belong. And so with this teaching being rooted in oneness, it seemed perfect. I felt and saw this throughout my practitioner training. I felt and saw this as I went through the Holmes Institute and into my first years of ministry. And then the election of 2016 happened. And what I saw was inside this center and many centers, we had to start taking a real hard look at that oneness principle again. Some members started to feel like they didn't fit in or belong, maybe for the first time ever in their lives. And what I believe is our challenge and our calling as practitioners of religious science is to continue to stay rooted in our oneness, to create that safe environment where there's belonging on both sides of the aisle, where there's a sense of belonging for all people. And how do we do this? I get back to that seeking the common good. What is it that we all are seeking? We're seeking the common ground as well of each of us being on a spiritual path. Each of us, I believe, wants a world that works for everyone. Now, again, I've been hanging out with you all for a long time, and so I kind of had gotten to this place of thinking everyone wants a world that works for everyone, and everyone wants to find healing and commonality. And then I went on vacation in January, and I had a really eye-opening experience, but it also led to a real aha moment. Due to my experiences and due to my teachings in oneness, I thought we all communicated with the ultimate goal of reaching a solution, of connecting in some way, of finding a way to solve whatever issues might have come up between us, whoever us is. Now, when I read that reading from the beginning, I realized, too, that I think part of what I really thought is that if another was going another way than mine, they really wanted to go my way. I just had to show them about how great my way is. Well, hello. I realized that people communicate for different reasons. And I realized that some people are communicating with me to convince me to go their way. They're also communicating maybe to let me know that they prefer exclusivity to inclusivity, that they actually prefer feeling like they're on top, or maybe they prefer being alone. And that inclusivity didn't really matter so much. They just were communicating with me to justify their position of whatever path they were on. And they didn't care if I went their way or not, or if we found a mutual way or a way to connect. Well, I have to tell you, when I finally got that we had two different reasons for trying to have a conversation, I was able to just go, oh, let's just stop this then. There's no reason, because we're doing it for two different reasons. And I refocused my ultimate goal, which was to just be love, to be a loving presence, and to connect in that space of love. And I just released the whole situation. This actually was a personal, in my family situation. And I felt so free. Now, it may look like I gave up, but what I realized is I gave over. What I did, because there was no sense of defeat, there was just a sense of release, of, oh, I get it. Why am I struggling to make something happen that this other person really doesn't care if it happens? I turned it over to love. I turned it over to the God of my understanding. I turned it over to the one mind. And I totally believe that resolution takes place there. And then I got that the unity that we're talking about is our unity with the one, with the source, with love. And it's that place, that one that connects with others. It's our place of loving. It's when we can move into love, where we can connect and just be present in whatever way needs to be present. It's the God or the love within each one of us that unifies us. Well then, of course, everything always falls into place. I read in the Science of Mind text from our wonderful founder, Ernest Holmes, all life is bound together by one common law of love. And love is the self-givingness of spirit. It was the realization of this one presence which illumined the saints and the sages of the past. I and the Father are one, that's a quote. The Father that dwelleth in me doeth the work, was another quote. We must come to sense this marvelous presence, for this is the secret of successful metaphysical work, God in all and through all. And so it was like, oh, just go back to the one and release and turn it over. Again, in this January Science of Mind magazine, another really good article called Hardcore Metaphysics. So he was just talking about the metaphysics and how that works. And this author said that hardcore metaphysics is new thought taught from its original position that humanity is God in expression, and that we have the power to transform our experiences through thinking in alignment with the truth of our being. Then this is the part that I really liked, because it was new to me. New Thought is a practical spirituality. At its core, New Thought focuses on our ability to demonstrate the principles we espouse. New Thought is not concerned with religious theories, philosophical arguments, and doctrinal traditions. This teaching only asks one question: what can you demonstrate? That really struck me. What can you demonstrate? So in the original reading, it said, now is the divine moment that allows us to heal whatever needs healing and get on with life together. And I realized that the healing, once again, is taking place within me. Not necessarily between us, actually. It's taking place in me. And then we can get on with life together. And what I realized, again, is that this doesn't necessarily mean that both of us agree and we get to walk down the same path singing Kumbaya and holding hands and everything is just exactly the way I want it. It may mean realizing that we need to release that desire for that kind of connection in that way and honor the path that each one of us is walking. That we both belong here, each of us on our own path. And that getting on with life together is allowing each one to walk in their path. In our healing consciousness group, we discussed what does it mean to heal, And what does it mean to be a healer? Because actually all of us are practitioners of this. As we're studying this, we are a practitioner of religious science as we put it into practice in our lives, which means then that all of us are healers on some level or another. And so in the group that we had, by the way, we meet every Thursday from 1 to 3, and it's a fabulous group. The discussion was rolling, and it started going really fast, and I'm quoting now, so excuse my language, but I'm quoting because this person was making a point. One of the people said to another, "What if I call you a dumbass?" And the response was, "Oh, come on, Betty, let's take it outside." Now, they were playing, okay? They were playing. But then I said, if you step into your practitioner self, what would your response be? And we thought about that, and I could see the facial expression, the body language change, and that more healed response came forward. And so I think we all know up here that oneness principle. We know we are all one. But if we're confronted with someone who's mutually driven, going another way than ours, when you see that, when you experience that, what can you demonstrate? How can you put these principles into action? As a practitioner of oneness, what can you demonstrate? What is the response? What will the answer be? Knowing we all belong, what can you demonstrate? And seeking that common good, what can you demonstrate? In the Healing Consciousness group, we all agreed that none of us, I'm including myself, none of us react from that practitioner minister mindset 24/7. Even though we might have the goal to heal enough so that our true essence, our true nature, is the place that we react from, respond from. And that true, loving, healing, peaceful, joyful self can be that place that we move from more often than not. Because that's part of our demonstration. How we are in the world. The space from which we respond is our demonstration to how these principles work. And then we can get on with life together, whatever that looks like. So healing. How do we heal so much to that place where we can respond in a way that we want to respond in any given situation? Well, I know for me, it's begun with seeking and exploring where was the first place in my life I felt like I didn't belong. When did I experience that? That sense of separation as opposed to unity. And then what did we tell ourselves when we had that experience? I think most of us have had it at some point or another. Did we tell ourselves, I don't belong, I'm not wanted, I don't fit in, I'm not worthy, I'm different? Those are a lot of messages that many of us have told ourselves, whether the rest of society has told us that or not. From that awareness, then, we can shift in ourselves and start changing that story, changing our thinking. I belong. And you can do a practitioner a big favor and seek them out and ask them to work with you on healing any spaces where you might still feel separation. Because anytime someone comes to us, those of us in the stoles, and asks for help in a healing process, we heal ourselves as part of the oneness. And so work together and figure out how to heal that place where we feel like we don't belong. Heal those messages that support that sense of separation so that we can demonstrate what oneness really looks like, what belonging really looks like. If you feel like you don't belong, what I realized is, and so I'm going to hopefully share with you, it's impossible not to belong. The principle of oneness is the very foundation of belonging. Everyone and everything has its place, its role, and its function. Everyone belongs, including me and including you. And so it is.